Hello, for those new to this channel, we have two focuses in Geospatial-Next. The first one is to look at how we widen the adoption of the technology that we know and love. So that's moving it from department to enterprise and broaden its use in other sectors. The talk I'm going to do today is focus on the second part of our conversation, and that's around blockchain and crypto. This particular talk is entitled Geospatial Blockchain 101. So let's dig in. Okay, so let's dig into our conversation. I wanted to start by quoting something by Raoul Pal. He has a very interesting channel called Real Vision, which is focused partly on investing. He comes from the investment world, the macro world of investing. But the biggest one, the one that I listen to, is actually on crypto. This is a quote from him. The internet grew at 63% a year. The crypto ecosystem is growing at 113%. The internet was the fastest tech adoption ever known. Crypto is twice faster than that. So just to get your attention on where we stand in terms of this whole world of crypto and blockchain, it's growing very, very rapidly. And for those that remember the internet, which I do very well, that seemed like it was going at light speed. This is going quicker. So what's today's focus? Whenever you do a search or read in the media about crypto, it's always on investing. It's on this coin's gone up, this coin's gone down, the market's doing this. It's always about investing. Again, that feels to me like the early days of the internet, and everyone will remember the internet bubble, which popped. This feels like those days to me. But I believe that time is best spent on understanding the fundamentals of blockchain. Yeah, I think it's good to spend time investing in it and, widening your portfolio, but that's a very different conversation. What I think people should be spending their time is on understanding. So why do I believe that? So I was thinking about this. We've really been through two tech revolutions over the last 30 years. When I first came to America in 1991, I came across the internet, or the World Wide Web as it was called. And I was lucky enough that the University of Utah was actually one of the few universities on that network. So I saw the internet really, really early into the game and realized what was coming. The second one was around about 2007, 2008. And again, I remember that because I started a company at that time, which is a mobile GIS company. But we saw mobile emerge, really sitting on top of the internet. But then people had mobile devices, and for us, within the geospatial GIS world, it meant that people had mobile computers with GPS. So that made things very interesting. But what was fundamentally different about both those revolutions? Yes, people started having web pages and social media became an important part of the mix for businesses. But did it fundamentally change business models? It didn't. If you look at the insurance market, the insurance has stayed exactly the same for 100 years. Hasn't changed. But crypto will turn everything on its head. Unlike those two revolutions, we're going to see a complete change in business models. Companies will go bust, and there are huge new opportunities for small and large to morph into something quite different. So let's explore that a little bit. And I'm going to pose a question actually which relates back to those old days of the internet. So I've mentioned a lot about Ethereum and Chainlink, and again, I'm not giving you investment advice on any of these things. These are just two technologies which have captured my imagination when it comes to the geospatial world. But the question I posed in the week in LinkedIn and Twitter was, are Ethereum and Chainlink today's versions of Cisco and Netscape of the 90s? Now, why do I ask that question? In the 90s, the bubble was based around folks building apps on top of this new thing called the internet. Lots of good ideas that were too early, lots of terrible ideas. The bubble that was the internet was really built around this new idea of people diving in into that world. And I sometimes, they were often called innovators. I sometimes picked a question that one. Often it was stupid ideas with stupid money chasing it. But why do I talk about Cisco and Netscape? Cisco were building the network, the routers, the switches that enabled the internet. So it was foundational. Netscape was one of the earliest browsers that came out. I remember Lynx, which was a text-based browser in 1992, when we saw these these newer versions of that, which included sort of multimedia elements, it was revolutionary. Those didn't go away when the bubble crashed during the internet. They were foundational. My question is, are Ethereum and Chainlink two of those examples? And again, I know I've spoken this about being a one-on-one, but I wanted to use Ethereum and Chainlink in this conversation just to paint the picture for you, to help you understand a little bit better. Okay. Let's rattle through some terminology. Now, I'm not going to, maybe over time we'll add some more to this, but I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. So what is a blockchain? The blockchain is a ledger. Think of accounting, think of transactions, money in, money out, evening things out, making sure everything is balanced. That's the blockchain in its most simplest of terms. Now, you hear a lot about miners, and you hear a lot about proof of work and proof of stake. These are all related. So what miners are doing is validating transactions, and proof of work, which is the energy conversation, is sort of first to the finish, if you like. Proof of stake is slightly different. We needn't go into those. But miners are guys that are out there that are crunching through the transactions on the blockchain and validating things. So that's what these guys are up to. Really simplistic, but I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page with this terminology. Now, I mentioned smart contracts. A smart contract is code which sits on the blockchain which contains an agreement. There's that word contract. So if you think of any contract that you sign, and again, we'll use insurance because it's a good example that many talk about. If you have a contract with an insurance company, that's a finite thing. It has a certain agreement. I'm going on vacation. I need health insurance. So you've got this contract. Smart contracts are essentially contracts which sit on the blockchain, which are locked in. Then there's no small print with a smart contract. It's simple. And it sits there, and it's code which executes when that contract terminates or when that contract needs to be executed. So that's really what a smart contract is. I think I've got one more. Now, I'd encourage you strongly to look at these terms. And when you dive into some of these terms, you're going to find a whole lot of other ones which confuse the heck out of you. So be ready. But tokens are spoken about a lot, and I've just given a sort of a default definition there. They can be used for investment purposes as a store of value, to make purchases, or they represent assets. So dive into tokens. Everyone thinks in terms of, they're trying to translate, because of its cryptocurrencies, people always think about money when it comes to the whole crypto world. Dive a little bit into tokens and understand a little bit more about the token economics, as people call it. Super important. All those four things there are really important for you to dive into. So I want to connect the dots in this one, and this is where we talk about Ethereum and Chainlink. So Ethereum is a layer 1 protocol. You can think of that as the blockchain. You can think of that as the base. You can also think of it as a network, and some people are going to get confused by me saying that, but think about it as a network, or think browser. I mentioned browser before. I'll move into the next piece before we dive into that. So there is technology built on top of Ethereum. There's layer 2 and there's layer 3. There's other layers, but let's just talk about Chainlink. So Chainlink sits on top of Ethereum. It's part of that network. Oh, and by the way, if you want to go and look up .eth, like apple.eth, that is an address within the Ethereum network. Go look at that. So Chainlink, it sits on top of Ethereum. It leverages their blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, and it's an API to oracles. There's that horrible term, APIs. Just think of that as a sort of a pointer to other stuff, and I'm really butchering that. But think of it as an access point to other things, and they provide that access point. So let's just add those two things in. This is really important, I think, to the geospatial world. So I've mentioned this in the last talk that I did. If you have a smart contract that sits on the blockchain, which is an agreement, what Chainlink and oracles allow you to do is to execute against that contract if things change. So if you want to reach out to get real world static data, for example, and you also want event-driven data as well, and I've put in there IoT, so devices that are giving real-time data back, or data that's been processed by AI to pull something out of it that's relevant, That's that side of the equation there. So think data, and I always say about the geospatial world, we're fundamentally location-based data. That's at the core of what we do. Everything else that sits on top of that is in addition to the core value proposition that we offer, which is data. So chain link, oracles, and data are really important, I think, to our world. And I think also, just to talk about that dynamic data, one of the key parts of Geospatial-Next, this conversation and the other conversation which I mentioned, which is how we move the value of that data wider to the enterprise and to other organizations, is bringing real-time data in. So people get a situational awareness folks, for example, get a real-time or near real-time idea of what's actually going on. Huge part of the area of importance for our data to organizations more widely than just locked into the GIS department. Okay, let's add one more to some decentralized applications. These are applications that sit within this chain. So you could set up a company and you could start building, just think of them as apps. They're called distributed apps or dApps. But if you could build an app which leverages, which connects, maybe you build a smart contract, you use oracles within that smart contract to make calls outside, and that's a service you provide. So I've just set up my own Matt Sheehan's insurance company. And you know what? I'm going to provide weather data from that insurance company such that we are only going to provide insurance contracts that relate to a weather event. So we'll pay you out if you've got some contract with us which requires, if there's hail in the next 24 days, pay the contract, something like that. So you've got sensors in the ground, or whatever data collection mechanism you're using. And that's what is basically executing ultimately that smart contract. So that's a dApp, and companies are building dApps, and again, there's a whole slew of terminology there. Okay, I don't want to go too long on this, so let's just talk about geospatial with a question mark. So my focus is blockchain and geospatial. I'm not going to talk about NFTs, maybe in another talk, but NFTs, Moistmap have released map art NFTs. If you're a map nerd, go look at Moistmap. I'm still kind of getting my head wrapped around NFTs and their value, but Moistmap's one I bumped into. One World's another one. One World is selling real world locations on planet Earth as NFTs. Go look at One World. You got to get your head wrapped around some of this stuff. I look at it and go, what is that? And then I dig a little bit deeper. So I'm encouraging you to do the same. Some people have asked me about there's quite a few companies that are looking at proof of location. I.e., is that GPS point that has been given to me accurate, or has somebody, slid something in there so it's not accurate? It's, there's a lot of reasons to actually have verification of a location. Foam are one of those companies that are focused there. Again, go look at what Foam are up to. AccuWeather have built oracles within the Chainlink world. Again, very notable, very forward thinking. There's a whole world of the metaverse. It's probably too much conversation about metaverse, but I think that when we think about digital twins, that's very relevant here. More to come on metaverse, but I think we're too early into that conversation. I think the bigger one for me ultimately is, and we'll finish on this, is I've always had the conversation that the value of geospatial is beyond just maps, and we have an industry which is sort of focused around map making and map generation and the value of maps. They undoubtedly have a lot of value, but we have a lot more value than just maps. And I think that when we start thinking about new business models, new uses of the data and processing of that data by AI, for example, it moves us beyond maps and moves us into a new world where we actually provide a wider value really to organizations. So I think, to me, that's where we make the giant leap, is to actually talk about data and think about services which sit against that data, which may or may not generate maps. Okay, so that's today's talk on Geospatial-Next crypto. I'll do another one in the near future. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for joining us on the Geospatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.